When I first got my classroom, I swore I wasn't going to be the mean teacher. I had heard it all from other teachers with the advice on don't smile to December. Your students are going to walk all over you. If you're too nice, make sure to be strict, set the expectations from day one. And I swore I wouldn't be that teacher who is raising their voice and making their kids scared of them during the first couple months of school. But the reality is, I ended up overcompensating and ended up being too nice. I went from being terrified of being too mean to going all the way to the other side of the spectrum and being too nice. So my students didn't respect me or listen to me, and I had to save the year halfway through the year because I had set the tone at the first half of the year by being too nice and become that teacher again that set the boundaries without being mean. And so today I'm going to talk about what steps did I take halfway through the year that allowed me to reset the tone to be a not mean teacher, but not a too nice teacher, but also not to have so strong of relationships with my teacher or my students that they felt like we were friends. What steps I took to reset that and how to fix it so it's not too late. So if you find yourself in a situation where maybe you're a little bit too close to your students, as in they don't really see you as the authority figure or as the leader of the classroom, then make sure to stick around because you won't want to miss this. So before we dive into the steps you should take in order to redirect the tone you're setting for the school year, let's talk about why it happens more than you think. And oftentimes teachers end up being too close to a friend to their students as opposed to a leader. So as teachers, we want to create strong relationships with our students. Many of us are just naturally that kind of person who wants to make an impact with our students, and we want them to feel seen, heard, and understood. And so we want to create that safe space so it's easy for us to try to create that welcoming environment. And it's easy to then go to one extreme and build really strong relationships without the boundaries that allow us to be the leader. We can still have really good relationships with our students while still having really good boundaries that position us as the leader in the classroom without having to be mean. And if this is you, you're not alone. I myself, like I said, and many other teachers make this same mistake, especially in the first couple of years of teaching. We're trying to find that balance between building strong relationships with our students and being there and supportive with that for them versus also making sure that we're also a leader in the classroom. So with that being said, here are the steps you can take in order to bridge the gap between maybe being friends with your students versus being the leader of your classroom while still building strong relationships with your students. So the first thing is respect is just as important as a strong relationship. So kids thrive when they have a thought leader in the class they can respect. So kids naturally are always looking for an authority figure or somebody in their life, like a role model they can look up to. And it's a lot easier to look up to somebody when they take on that leadership role and they have strong boundaries versus somebody who's just there to build a strong relationship with. That kind of differentiates them from being a peer to a teacher or a leader. And students need someone to look up to, like I said, someone who makes them feel seen, heard, and understood, and safe. And it's a lot easier for students to feel safe when that authority figure or that role model or that mentor has strong boundaries in place. So students need you as a leader, not as a classmate. And the distinction here becomes from strong relationships and having respect or boundaries. So With that being said, let's talk about steps to reset without being mean. How can you find that balance for yourself without coming off as the mean teacher that I'm sure you're secretly a little worried about becoming? So the first thing is to reteach or reinforce those boundaries. So one year I had students who kept trying to message me in the middle of the night to chat or catch up. And this was a clear indicator to me that I had not been a good leader in my classroom on setting those expectations and those boundaries. I had crossed over into the friendship and not into the leader with strong relationships section. So what I ended up doing is I set firm boundaries. I let my students know that I will always be there for them in regards to the classroom. However, reaching out to me in personal life to chat or check up late at night is just not a boundary I'm willing to change. And that really helped reinforce that boundary or that distinction between leader and friendship. Another thing that you can do, or that I've done to reset the tone of leadership versus friend, is to follow through on consequences. And now I know it's easy as a teacher to not want to have to take, recess away, to give consequences, stuff like that. But the reality is, when you do that, you're actually doing a disservice to your students because you're showing them that they don't need to take you seriously. And so oftentimes if you give them one warning, you're gonna have to give them a ton of different warnings. So if you give them a consequence, make sure to follow through with it the first time. An example of this is, let's say a student makes a mess in the bathroom, and if you give them warnings, instead of having them clean it up, your student's gonna learn that they don't need to take it seriously and it's okay to make a mess. So instead, what you can have them do, let's go back from friendship role to leadership role, is if a student makes a mess in the bathroom, you don't call them out in front of the class. You don't, raise your voice to them. You pull them for a silent conversation and say, hey, the expectation is this. Here are your choices. So you can practice. So you're gonna go clean up the mess and write an apology letter to the custodian for making a mess in the bathroom. Next time, the expectation is this. If you continue to make a mess in the bathroom, then we'll have to have somebody, like another male teacher or someone, stand outside the stalls, to make sure we're following this expectation. Another example is, let's say we have students who are messing around in line. A good way to give a follow through with a consequence is, let's say you have students messing around in line. You're gonna pull them aside from the class to where the class can't hear them. And you're gonna have a conversation about, hey, the expectation is this. I noticed you're this. Please practice following, or please show me what it should look like and sound like to get in line the correct way. If we continue to have a hard time practicing in line what it should look like, or showing me what it should look like to get in line, then we're gonna have to practice at the end of the day what it should look like and sound like getting in a line while the rest of the class does Fun Friday or whatever it may be. So you're telling them the expectation and then you're following through with your consequence. So you give the opportunity for the student to get back in line the right way and do that the rest of the day, or if they continue to mess around in line, then at the end of the day, you follow through. You have them practice that expectation of getting in line the correct way. So again, I like to think of boundaries and expectations kind of as like fence lines. If we were to have a playground with no fence or clear boundary, students would just run amok. They might go play in the street, which is not very safe for them. However, when you have clear boundaries and expectations, students have a safe place to play. They're not constantly worried about how far they can go from the school without getting in trouble or yelled at. Instead, there's a clear fence post line and they're playing and being kids in that boundary. Whereas if they don't have that, then they're going to be constantly checking to see where that boundary is to a point where they feel safe enough to then play and be kids. So don't feel bad about following through with the consequences you set. Make sure to follow through with them because again, you're just benefiting your students because it's easiest for them to feel safe when they know what the clear consequences and expectations and boundaries are. The next step you can take to reset the tone for the school year is to use a neutral, unattached language from the consequence. Now, this was something that was really hard for me to learn. I took on my students' behavior as my own and as my worth as a teacher. So for example, if my class did a really bad, weren't following the expectations in a line in the hallway, then I'd be embarrassed and I would think that was a reflection of me as a teacher. Or let's say I had 2 students who were messing around in lunch. I would be embarrassed because I would take on that behavior as my own. But the reality is, your students make the choices. All you can do as a teacher is set them up for success, but at the end of the way, the decision is theirs. And making that distinction was really hard for me to grasp, and it took me a couple of years. But when you have students who are not following the expectations and you need to give a consequence, make sure to do it in a neutral, unattached language from the consequence. So say the consequence without bringing any emotion, without heightening your voice, just neutral, flat tone, matter-of-factly. So remember, their behavior and their consequence has nothing to do with you and your worth. It's just like it doesn't define you as a teacher. It has everything to do with them and their choices as a student. So again, matter-of-factly separate yourself from the consequences and move on. So for example, let's say I have a student who's talking in class with a peer. I'm gonna pull them for a sideline conversation and say, hey, I noticed in class that you're talking a lot to so-and-so. Is there a reason for that? Because the expectation is our eyes are facing forward, our mouth is at a level 0 when someone else is talking, and our hands are to ourselves. Okay, I can see, you had a question, or, get to the root cause. Well, the consequence is this. So how about moving forward? If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, or if you're too embarrassed to ask that question, just give me a 2 or a 3 during the lesson, and I'll know to go back and check in with you to see if you have a question that I can answer for you when everyone else is working, so you don't feel embarrassed about asking it. But the expectation in class is that our eyes are facing forward, our hands are to ourselves, we have a bubble in our mouth, and we raise our hand if we have a question or we want to add to the discussion. So we have 2 choices. We can either follow that expectation and give me a 2 or a 3 if you have a question that you would like to ask me at the end of the lesson, or we're gonna have to practice what it looks like and sounds like to follow that expectation in class during free time at the end of the day or during extra time at the end of the day. So notice I didn't say like, oh my goodness, I didn't bring my emotion to it. I kept it very neutral, matter of fact. Here's the expectation. Let's get to the root cause. Here's the next steps. The choice is yours. It doesn't impact me either way what they decide. I'm just giving them the facts. And it's really hard for students to try to drag you in or pull you in or test any boundaries because you're so matter-of-factly. They know there's no emotion to pull on. There's no way to get you upset because you're just very neutral about it. So that is that step. If you want to take it a step further, the next step would be finding the balance. So you might be wondering, where's the balance for me in regards to being the strict, mean teacher versus the nice teacher, the leader versus the, relationship builder? And my best advice I can give to you is to listen to your own intuition. And by that, this took me a while again to figure out. But for me, when I know something is aligned and it's the right next step, or it's the right line in the middle of a spectrum like that, or a gray area, I listen to what feels good to me or feels excited about me, or ooh, that's it, that's the line for me. Because we're all different. We're all gonna have our different boundaries and our different lines. If it ever feels like I should have, or I have to or don't, like stuff like that, then oftentimes that's misaligned to me. So I might dive in a little deeper. So make sure whenever you are finding yourself in a dilemma of, being nice versus strict and trying to find that middle ground, ask yourself, how does this next action, if I do that, make me feel? If it makes me feel like, yes, that's it. If it lights you up, then follow through with it. If it's like, well, I do want to do this, but I should, this is what other people are doing, stuff like that. And oftentimes that's misaligned, and I'll dive into further on why that is and see if I can't come up with a different solution that's more aligned with me, that gets me to that lit up, excited. So for me, this boundary personally, what it looks like in my classroom is I can be kind, supportive, approachable, and fun and caring while still being respected and positioning myself as the leader of the classroom. I like to think of it as I'm like the coach of the classroom. I'm still focusing on my players. I'm making sure they're good to go, that they're safe, that they're getting everything they need. I'm still that safe space for them. I'm still helping them work as a team, but at the end of the day, I'm still the coach, I'm still the leader, and I still have firm boundaries that position me as such. And that's kind of where I've drawn the line. So it's all about how you show up in the classroom. So for me, this is my classroom. I'm the leader, and we build a strong relationships here out of love and support while still having mutual respect, boundaries, and expectations that allow us all to be safe. And you don't have to choose one or another. You can find the balance for yourself. It just kind of takes time to figure that out for yourself. So that recaps, or that is everything in regards to how to find that line between friendship versus leader in the classroom. So let's recap what we covered so far in this week's content. First, we talked about why it happens more often than you think. Then we talked about how respect is equal to that of friendship. Or building strong relationships. The third thing, we talked about steps to reset without being the mean teacher. And the fourth thing is we talked about finding the balance between the two. If you found this week's content helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe or leave a review wherever you're tuning in from. That way more content like this can reach more teachers who need it. And I have several resources for you if you liked this week's content. So the first thing, if you want me to answer the top 10 most commonly asked questions I get in regards to classroom management, like what to do about a chatty class, what to do when students interrupt you, etc., definitely go check out my free classroom management guide. This is my guide that, like I said, answers the top 10 questions I get in regards to classroom management. Plus, not only do I answer it in the guide, I link to additional podcasts and YouTube videos, so you're not sifting through all my content. You can find your answers directly and save you time. The second thing is, if you want me to create done-for-you resources, or you want to see what I'm using in my classroom as inspiration, definitely check out the Classroom Management Bundle. This is my bundle of everything I use in my classroom in regards to classroom management, things like classroom jobs, classroom procedures, whole brain teaching, super improver wall, stuff like that. So if you want to see what that might look like, definitely go check that out. If you want to take it a step further and you want more of the strategy, the how-to, what should I do when, definitely check out the Present Teacher Circle. The Present Teacher Circle is my community for new and first-year teachers who are looking to thrive in their first couple years of teaching. In the very first 2 modules, we cover everything classroom management, and there's even a 15-day classroom management challenge. But what I like most about this community and this program is it grows with you, meaning we don't only just cover classroom management, we cover things like grading, lesson planning, everything you need to know as a new teacher to help you thrive and to eliminate that or prevent that burnout that you often hear a lot of teachers reaching. And what I like about it is it's all open at once. So if you want to focus on, say, classroom management for the first month, and then you want to focus on planning the second month, you can jump around, or you just want to listen to all of it in a weekend, you can do that. So definitely go check that out if you're wanting more of my coaching and strategies behind teaching. That wraps up everything. I hope you found this helpful. Which strategy are you going to be using this week to reset the tone, to position yourself as the leader instead of the friend? Let me know in the comments or send me a DM. I'd love to chat. As always, remember, we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, teacher bestie. Bye!